It looks like we have our group. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention that our next meeting is June 23rd, and we actually have another guest speaker. We have Matt today, and Kenny Wolf on the 23rd.
Oh, my good friend Kenny.
Oh, you know Kenny?
He just closed on a property today. He just on Facebook. But yeah, I had Kenny at my meetup out here in Boston.
Oh, that's cool. Small world, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, if anyone's doing calls with syndicators like we talked about, if you just want to maybe shoot me an email on who you've talked to, if you're talking to sponsors, because I would like to have you speak at our next meeting, just to kind of give an overview of what you've had. So I'm trying to kind of keep a rough list. I've been doing a lot of calls, and I'd like to share some of that, and I'd like to have you guys do that too. So just shoot me an email if you are talking to any syndicators. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who is going to introduce our mustached guest. I can't get over it. It's awesome.
Yeah. So we have Matt, and I apologize. Is it Picheny or Picheny?
Yeah, Picheny.
Picheny.
Yeah.
Okay, Picheny.
Yeah.
Okay, somewhere in between there. But anyway, I've known Matt for a couple of years now, and actually I met him through his wife. I listened to a Buck Joffrey podcast a few years ago, and she was on the show, and she was talking about Broadway show investing. I thought that's pretty intriguing. So I actually ended up talking to her a few times, and ended up doing her syndication with the Moulin Rouge show, which up until the COVID crisis was doing pretty well. I'm sure they'll come around here in a few months once Broadway starts opening up. But anyway, she introduced me to Matt as a real estate investment expert, I guess. And so I had a nice conversation with him, and then he had a property open up in Lawrence, Kansas, which is where the University of Kansas is. And I've been involved with that syndication for about 2 years now, and I believe it's on the market now for sale. Is that correct, Matt?
It's on the market for sale.
Yeah. So that's great. So I've had a great experience with both of them. And I think, Matt, your presentation is kind of your journey through real estate investing. So I don't want to take too much of your thunder away from you. So I'll just leave it up to you for the rest of the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. So yeah, Steve and I met, and also I met Jim at an event.
Buck Joffrey, yeah.
I think like a year ago, because we met at the first one, but then on the second time we were both in Dallas. That's when we really kind of hung out and got to know each other and really connect. So that was awesome. Yeah. And so yeah, thanks for asking me to speak. I know I had talked with both of you guys about maybe coming to Columbus and doing it actually in person, which I would love to do. And then this COVID crisis came, which just gives us the opportunity to do it remotely, which is easier. And one of you guys, one of you guys recording this?
I am, yes.
I'd love to get a copy when it's over. So
okay, definitely.
I'm just gonna go ahead, if it's okay, and do this screen share here. And let me know if everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So this is just a little presentation I put together called Scaling from Zero, and just talking about, how I got started, and we'll touch a lot of different topics. If you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to, just unmute yourself and ask a question. Happy to take any questions you might have. Just a couple disclaimers before we get into the nitty gritty. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA, right? So I'm going to tell you everything as I know and I understand things, but don't take my word for it. Make sure you go to your trusted team of advisors and get legal counsel, especially when it comes to tax kind of things. Everyone's situation is a little bit different. So I'll touch, I think, on passive loss a little bit, and passive loss rules are different for different people. So, just a little disclaimer there. So the early days, I grew up in Orlando, Florida. I was born in 1973. Here's a picture of me in 1975. before my first day of preschool, a little apartment complex called Oakwood Village. And so that was me, short little kid, growing up. It looks like I had some probably pretty serious bell bottoms on in that picture. And then here's me many years later in high school, actually in 1990, dressed like Mowgli from the Jungle Book because I worked at Walt Disney World. Yep.
Your mustache today looks like
Yes.
the wig from your Mowgli
The wig.
costume.
It does, except for there's a little bit of gray in it. But yeah, I would agree with you. Very similar. So yeah, that was me, probably 17 years old, working at Disney World, going down Main Street as Mowgli. So, I was always very interested in performing and the performing arts and stuff like that. So that was my high school job. And then I moved to New York in 1992. And this is what Google says that Times Square looked like around 1992. And I moved there to pursue a career in theater. I went to a musical theater academy called the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. And I graduated from there. And this was my headshot in 1994. And went out on some auditions and I got some shows. All in all, I was in, I think it was about 15 different professional productions of musicals throughout the country, and also international tours and things like that. And that was great, and I had a lot of fun. In between gigs, which wasn't that often, but in between the acting jobs, I was waiting tables. And I got to a point in my career in theater where I was having done so many different shows in so many different locations and tours and things like that. I was really honing in on, holding out for specific types of roles and things that I wanted to do. And while that was happening, I started having an opportunity to, instead of wait tables in between the jobs, I had started tinkering around with computers. And this was in the days of the big .com craze was coming around. And I started, the internet was huge, but a lot of companies did not have a capability to do internet, right? There was a lot of small boutique agencies in New York, which is where I was living in New York City, and they did not, they didn't have a digital arm, but they were like design shops that would do print brochures for people. And so obviously their clients would want a website. And so I came in and that's kind of how I started off and created my own company, actually, called Picheny Productions. And we were a small boutique agency working for a lot of smaller businesses and then bigger businesses and then bigger businesses. And then that kind of went bust right around the September 11th, 9/11 happened. And Showtime, who was a client of mine, they offered me a position in-house. So I went over to Showtime. And then over a period of about 16 years, I worked at all of these different agencies in New York, advertising agencies, focusing on digital marketing. So that was, from 2000 to around 2016. Had a lot of fun, worked a lot of crazy hours. And during the last few years that I was working in the advertising agency, not literally Madison Avenue, but figuratively Madison Avenue, I met my wife and we got married. We had a child. So my kid was a little over a year, he was about a year old. And my wife was presented with an opportunity, and that opportunity was in Florida. So we moved to Miami. Now, I grew up in Orlando, which is a totally different place than Miami. But we moved down there, and quite honestly, I had been I was sort of burned out from the agency life. Well, actually, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit because while I was working on Madison Avenue, I made my first real estate purchase. So my first real estate purchase was this unit right here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it was actually this unit right here. It was a 1-bedroom apartment in the Washington Heights area of New York City. I bought that in 2001. And then I sold it in 2003 and moved into a nicer, slightly bigger 1-bedroom apartment, but in a much more desirable part of New York on the Upper West Side. So instead of it taking 45 minutes to an hour to get to work, I could get to work in 15 minutes, which was much nicer. I was able to do that because I made a substantial amount of money with that purchase and sale. I had only put down 20% down on the property, and the property itself had more than doubled in value. So I think I had like a 5x return on the capital I had put in on the deal. And so when I moved into this place on 76th Street, I was like, wow, that's really powerful. Like, I just made a huge amount of money. I think I like this real estate thing. This seems really interesting. Now, mind you, this was a primary residence, but it was my first real estate purchase and sale. And I was pretty pleased with that. So I then went ahead and made my first actual real estate investment. And what I did was I bought a property up in Connecticut at an area called Woodridge Lake, about 2 hours door to door from New York City. And living in Manhattan, it was nice to have a vacation home, a country house. So I actually bought some land there. I bought a raw piece of land in 2006. And then in 2009, you can see we taped off all of the trees. We had to get them approved to cut down the trees, to clear a space, to build a house. So that's me after the lot was cleared and dug, and we're pouring the foundation. Those are the forms for the concrete. And then the house was built. So in 2010, the house was done. And like I said, my initial intention was, oh, this will be a good long-term investment and it'll be a place for me to use. And at the time, it was going to be a little costly for me to cover the monthly payments. And I thought, well, gee, I can rent this during the summertime because of that. You saw the lake and the boats and everything. It's a very desirable place. So maybe I rent it for a month or two during the summer, and that'll help defray my cost of ownership. So that's what I did. I was surprised at how much demand there was for the property. And I was also pleasantly surprised to find out that there was demand for it not during the summer. Also, there was demand during the winter because right next to the area is a very, very small ski area. Very small. But if you have very young children who are just learning to ski and you live in New York City, it's one of the closest decent sized mountains near the city. And so people used to rent the house for the winter. So it became pretty clear after ownership, within that first year that, hey, I'm actually not going to be able to enjoy this as much because there is so much demand for the property as a rental. So it became a full-time rental. I mean, I would enjoy it maybe a weekend here or there every year, but I think less than 10 days a year, not very, very much at all. I had also met my future wife at that time, and her parents had a place in Connecticut as well that was out of the city, so we could go there. So it all kind of just worked out. So that was fun. And so that sort of became, like a side hustle for me. At the time, I didn't, that term wasn't around, side hustle, right? But it sort of has become, a term that's used. I used to rent it out, and I would have it on VRBO, and I had it on Home Away, and I learned so much from that. I learned different accounting principles like depreciation, which I had never known about before. Obviously, the entire construction, we built the thing from scratch, was a tremendous learning experience. And then learning how to like look at tenants and vet tenants, and there was all kinds of different things and problems and challenges that came up along the way. And so that was a really good learning experience for me. Which leaded into my next thing, which is I did what they're now calling a house hack. Now, there may have been people calling it a house hack back when I did it, which wasn't even all that long ago, but 6 or 7 years ago. But I didn't, well, maybe 8. I had never heard the term before. I didn't know that I was house hacking, but I knew that I was buying a duplex where I was going to rent out the top units and live in the bottom unit. So, you know, it was two units. The upstairs unit we rented, and we lived in the downstairs unit. And the upstairs unit helped pay for a good portion of the mortgage. We still had to pay rent, but the rent that we paid, or it was our portion of the mortgage payment, was less than what we would have been paying in rent had we been renting an identical property. So this was done in 2013. Bought this property, rented out the top, and then that leads me to the next section, which is then my wife got an opportunity down in Miami. She was presented with an opportunity for a job down there, completely out of the blue. We were not planning to move, but because of that opportunity, we decided to go ahead and do it. I was kind of burned out from the whole agency life. And when I got down there, I looked at a couple of agency jobs, but they were all much smaller. I'd been working, on very large teams. Like, I mean, the Verizon team that I managed was over 100 people in New York. And then I get to Miami and it's like, there's like 5 people in the agency. So it was a lot different and not really the same type of work that I had been doing, and not the same opportunity. And like I said, I was kind of burned out from that agency life. So to have an opportunity to kind of reassess what I wanted to do, and at the time that we first went down there, I listened to Rich Dad Poor Dad. I know a lot of you guys have probably read the book. I did the audio book, which I would not recommend, because at least the version that I heard, the guy who narrated it was just terrible. But the lessons from the book were fantastic. I'm sure that, I'd say, go ahead and raise your hand if you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yeah, everyone that's coming up on my screen, I don't have everybody, but has just put their hand up, because it's uncanny how many people read that book and then obviously get involved in the real estate stuff. So for me, one of the things that was really compelling, there was like 2 big takeaways for me from the book, which was, creating multiple streams of passive income. And then the other was, he said, there's these guys who come to your town and they're like doing a seminar or whatever, and like it costs some money, but like just go to it. Like, you might learn something, you'll meet people, just get involved. And so, like, lo and behold, like a week later, I'm driving down the street and on the radio comes on this thing for this like tax liens, like, this course, this tax lien course, like learn how to, get involved in real estate. No money necessary, become rich in a week, whatever. So I decided to go to this seminar. So I went, and I don't remember how much I paid, but I was like, oh, I'm paying a few $100s. What am I doing here? This is going to be such a ripoff. But I went, and I got into it. And of course they had a whole mentorship group that you could join, and I didn't really want to do any of that. And I sort of started following the plan of these tax liens, and I got involved, started doing some auctions online, and actually made a trip out to Akron, Ohio. My cousin lives in Cuyahoga Falls, which is sort of right between Cleveland and Akron. and thought, hey, you know, maybe I can find some stuff in Cuyahoga Falls. It's a nice little town and places don't cost that much money. And I went out there and got to know a broker and started going to some of these auctions. You know, I drove by the properties with the broker, but we couldn't go into them, and went to these auctions at the courthouse, and I lost out on all of them. And so that was that. But then I had this relationship that I had developed with this broker, and so we started looking at some things together, and I actually ended up buying this house in Akron, not too far away from where my aunt and uncle. So my aunt and uncle ended up moving to Akron, and then I have some cousins. So, you know, there's a lot of family around there, and this was not a very expensive house. And so I bought this house, and I made it look like this. So it was nice. We did a flip on the house, and I got some money in my pocket. You know, this was the kitchen before when we purchased the house. This is what it looked like when we finished with it. And so then I did another one, and this is what it was like before, and this is the after shot. Again, kitchen before. You'll notice in the back, this wall's all broken. Over here, there's like a window. And so we blew out that window and put in a slider and just, you know, fixed it all up. And, you know, made the house look modern, and made a couple bucks. So from there, I went on into some single family housing, because this was really hard to do and really hard to manage from remotely. Buying these properties, the first one we made good money. This one we lost a couple of bucks, because there's all these unforeseen things with pipes and electric that you can't see in this type of situation, right? When you're buying something, we were buying these out of like a HUD, on these like HUD sales, and you're not allowed to do an inspection, so you get what you get. And I felt like that was too much of a crapshoot. And what I was finding out was that a lot of people either think they can flip properties because they, you know, watched a show on HGTV, or a lot of people are contractors who are going to these like the courtroom steps. So what was happening was they were essentially buying themselves jobs. And so what I mean by that is the prices at which they were paying for these, there was no way for me to make money as the investor. But that's because me as the investor, I'm hiring a contractor and they have some markup. So they can pay what I'm going to pay, or even a little bit more, because they don't need to worry about that markup. They've got their own like sweat equity that they're putting into it. And so it's almost like they've bought a job for themselves. I just couldn't compete in that market, and it was a lot of work, and a lot of risk. And I was also getting to know people now, because I've been getting involved, you know, with real estate full time in Miami, and started to get to meet more people and network more, and was getting really interested in single family houses. And so my idea was to start continue to well, initially I was going to continue flipping houses to have enough capital to then put that into buying single family homes. And so this was the first single family home that I bought. It was in Memphis, Tennessee, through a turnkey provider. And the thing I really liked is they would do essentially the same thing I was doing, but they were buying literally hundreds of houses every year, usually like 300 or 400 houses a year they do. And so they had all those connections with people. They had a name in the community. They had connections at the courthouse and all of these different things. So they're able to buy properties very quickly, very inexpensively, and then they rehab them completely. I mean, this house had brand new roof, brand new electric, brand new plumbing, like everything brand new, looks great. An interesting tidbit about the Tennessee market, the Memphis market specifically, is that renters don't expect there to be appliances. They actually usually take their appliances from place to place. So you don't have to worry about appliances in your unit, and you don't have to worry about the wear and tear and the maintenance on those, which is fantastic. So I bought this property, Um, and it's professionally property managed. And then I ended up buying this other one too. I still own both of these properties to this day, and they both cash flow incredibly well. But as you guys probably know, once you get past 10 of these, it doesn't really make sense anymore, because you can't get the traditional housing, the financing that you can get, you know, on a single family home or anything up to 4 units. You can get really great, fully amortizing 30-year debt, low interest rates. And that's great. But once you get past 10, they're not going to be backed by Fannie and Freddie anymore. So you're not going to be able to get a conventional loan. So you have to start moving into the commercial loan world. And as far as I can see from my experience, there's the only true benefit, I think, in going for 1 to 4 units over going really large is the financing aspect. The fact that you can get this 30-year fixed financing is incredible. But the fact is, you max out at 10. So, you know, I did the math, and it was like, what, if you make $100 a door, and you got 10 of these, let's say you make $200 a door, and you got 10 of these, you know, you're making, I think at max $24,000 a year, which, I mean, heck, if someone wanted to knock on my door and give me $24,000 every year, I wouldn't turn it down. I mean, it's not bad money, but it's not the kind of money that I'm going to be able to use to sort of replace what I had been getting previously, and something that I could totally live off of. It's a nice supplement. There's a lot of hard work involved. I mean, you've got 10 different loans that you've signed on, and there's a lot involved in it. So that's when I decided to sort of scale up. And I had always wanted to do that, but didn't really know how. And I learned about syndication. I think you all probably know this. It sounds like you guys are all very advanced, but in case anyone there who's not, you know, syndication is when a bunch of investors get together and invest in something. And so in my case, it's real estate. But my wife and I sometimes partner together and do syndications on Broadway shows, right? So syndicate is really just any group of people getting together and investing in an asset. It's not exclusive to real estate, although that's what we're talking about tonight. So I had heard about syndication. I had been listening to podcasts and things of that nature. And I had got turned on to the real estate guys. If you guys don't listen to them, they're a fantastic podcast. Really looking at real estate from a 30,000 foot level, kind of looking at all different types of markets, all different types of investments. They even have like a resort that they own that you can invest in, but they have they talk about single family, they talk about multifamily, industrial, retail, everything. And they also do a lot of different things about like they have a great thing they do every once in a while called Clues in the News, where they'll talk about what's going on in today's headlines from recent newspaper articles that they've come across, and talk about something that might seem unrelated to real estate, but how this might affect the real estate market. Very cool, interesting stuff. They also have some seminars. So this was the first big seminar that I went to since that one in Miami, the tax lien one. And this one cost a lot of money. At least I felt it was expensive. I mean, it was like, I don't know, it was like $1,500 or more. I think it was above that. Plus, it was in Dallas, so I had to fly to Dallas, get a hotel room, and do all that stuff. But I can tell you, I think that was the best money I've ever spent in my entire life. It really got me so involved in the real estate space, and just got me in a room with like 30, 40 other people who were all in real estate. And so this was a seminar that they do a few times a year called The Secrets of Successful Syndication. And like I said, it's like a 30,000 foot level look at syndication, very, very broad. And there's people who syndicate multifamily or syndicate assisted living facilities or all different kinds of things. But it really kind of gave me an overview, talked about the legality of syndications and how that works. That's where I met the syndication attorney that I work with. It's also how I met Buck Joffrey, actually, was at one of these events. And that was great and really got me involved in the syndication world. So really quick about syndications. And again, if anyone has any questions, like unmute, chime in. But just talking about multifamily versus single family, this is kind of like a little chart that shows you. So at the top, you have a lot of control on a deal, but you also have to put a lot of effort in. And then as you go down this chart, and this is assuming that you're a passive in the syndications, right? If you're active in the syndications, whole other world. But this shows you the amount of effort and control. So if you're involved in a syndication, I mean, you're working on figuring out, okay, who is this person? Can I trust them? They have a really, shady looking mustache. I don't know about this guy. Or what is this property, right? So what is this market? What is this property? Who is this person? Do I feel good about that? Yes, I do. Okay, here's a check. I'm done. Like that's it. That's the level of involvement that you have. You don't have control over it. And in the documents that you sign, there's a large amount of documents that you sign. You basically saying like, look, I know my money's at risk. I know I have like pretty much no control. There is a clause. I'm actually working on a book right now to help people who are interested in investing passively, and there's a clause that I always like to make sure is in these PPM documents that I would recommend, which is just there's a clause that can be in there. That's often in there that will allow all the limited partners to actually vote out the manager if they need a super majority. But that way, if the manager's like really just not doing well and the deal's tanking, it's a parachute, right? So it's important to make sure you have that. But
Hey,
but
Matt.
other than that, yeah.
Hey, just a quick question. I like your effort control paradigm.
Yeah.
If you were to add rate of return to this paradigm, how would you like draw that in or factor that in your experience?
In my own personal experience, so I have found for fix and flips them not to be, they can be extremely profitable, but because of the unknown, it's like you might want to look at some sort of like a risk adjusted return on this or something like that. But the risk that's involved in the fix and flips for me, and I'm not saying that for everybody, if you're in that town and you have a system, it can be very profitable. But for me, it really wasn't. The buy and holds have been good for me. I don't know that I think that they're all similar. I really do. But I think the level of risk involved, right, and the level of time that you have to put is really where the difference is. That's how I see it. I think note investing, private lending, syndications, those kinds of things, you're doing due diligence up front. With note investing and private lending, you got to keep making sure you're getting those payments, and you're still kind of running that, where with the syndication as a passive, you really aren't doing anything. But I don't want to jump ahead too far in the presentation, but I'm invested in a lot of units now. But 75% of those are deals that I'm a passive investor in, completely passive. And for me, when I'm going to invest in one of these things, I make sure that the rate of return is at a level that I'm comfortable with. I mean, at least a pro forma, right? People may or may not hit their projections. So therefore, things that would have there are deals with lower returns, I just choose not to invest in those deals. So for me, they're all about the same. I don't know. My single family homes, the return is like 18 to 20% return on investment on an annualized basis. I mean, it's ridiculous. But they're also properties that I bought for like the property is like $80,000. So, it's like, how much money do I have in that? Like, what is my my capital return is huge when you look at it a percentage basis, but when you look at it on a yearly basis, like, oh, I made $2,000 off of it or something like that. I think it's more than that, but it's just, there's such a small amount. I mean, think about it. If it was $100,000 and neither of the properties in Memphis were 100, but let's say it was 100 and you put 20% down, so you put $2,000 down. $20,000 down, and you're getting a 10% return. That would be $2,000. If you're getting a 20% return, it's $4,000. Which, again, I mean, look, I'm not going to shy away from $4,000. It's nice, but it's not at the scale where if I'm investing in a passive investment, I can put in $50,000 or $100,000, and then all of a sudden, a 15% return or even a 10% return, on a $100,000 investment, that's $10,000. And then while on the property in Memphis, I do get some sort of depreciation on the syndication. We do a cost segregation study, so there's bonus depreciation. There's just tremendous tax benefits up front. Plus, we're looking to sell it within 5 to 7 years, where on my and then have a much larger return that I won't get on the single family. If I go to sell that in 5 or 7 years, I'm not going to have that kind of return. I'm getting a better cash on cash, but I'm not going to get a big bump at the end. So I don't know if that was helpful or not.
It was very helpful, Matt. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. So just a really quick overview of what a syndication is. There's usually a sponsor, or they're called a general partner. They could be an entity or a person, and then they create a legal entity. It's a single purpose LLC, and that holds the title to the property. And then there's investors that invest into that legal entity. So there'll be a legal entity, there'll be investors. You should always make sure that your sponsor is also one of those investors. But then the sponsor will also get some portion of the entity for being the person who's putting the whole thing together. And they will be the manager or name the manager of the entity. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, it's a bit more complicated, but that's kind of how a syndication is set up. Obviously, as that entity is profitable, as the real estate, has cash flow, goes into the legal entity, and then the entity will then make distributions to the investors pro rata for the amount that they've invested. Because some people may have invested, several hundreds of thousands of dollars, and someone may have only put in, $50K or something like that. Okay. So, most of the time, these are a repositioning opportunity. So you acquire a cash flowing property in a good market, and then you go ahead and you do this reposition or this value add. So you're buying a property that it has, rents that are preferably below market. Maybe hasn't been updated in a long time. And then you go in and you fix it up, you fix up the amenities. It's kind of like flipping a house. It really is, but like on a much larger scale. It takes, a few years to cycle through all the units, because you don't want to like clear out your property. You want to wait until there's natural attrition. And then as each unit becomes available, you'll then upgrade it, and you upgrade the amenity package and the curb appeal of the property. And over time, you're able to raise the rents, thus giving you cash flow, but also raising your net operating income. So you have your income minus your expenses is called net operating income. And if you can raise that net operating income, you're raising the value of the property. That's like a super nutshell version of what I'm writing a whole entire book about, but that's kind of the basics of doing a value add on a syndication. So are there any questions about the syndications and kind of how they're set up? Okay, so let me tell you about my first syndication. My first syndication was a property in Albuquerque, New Mexico, called Home at Uptown. I invested in this. The sponsors, there was 3 sponsors, and one was a couple, and I met all of them actually at that real estate guys conference. And then they were also involved in a mentorship group that I was a part of, an educational group that I had joined. And I got to know them very well and like them. The guy, not the couple, but the guy, I'm actually very good friends with to this day. And we always invest in each other's deals and stuff. But this was 77 units in New Mexico. And we've since sold the property. It was not doing well. We made a couple of bucks, but nothing really. But we didn't lose money, so that's good. So I went on from there, to invest in a bunch of other properties, all as a limited partner, as a passive investor, over the course of a few years. Some properties in Texas, Jacksonville, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia. And so at this point, I had, one, including the property in New Mexico, I had 1,222 units under my belt.
Matt?
Yeah.
Are these all with different sponsors, or is this just the same group?
These were, every single one of these was different sponsors, except for the 2 in Atlanta, Georgia. That was a packaged portfolio, so that was the same sponsor.
How did you find the sponsors?
Good question. I found them through the Real Estate Guys syndication that I had, seminar that I had been in, and then this group that I joined, that I was a part of, and got to know people over time, network with people at different events, call people on the phone, talk with them on Facebook, and develop relationships with people such that I felt comfortable with giving them, $50K or more of my money. So I had invested in, over 1,200 units. And so you see this one down here, Waco, this circle at 1,800. So this one, I actually was a key principal in. So if you want to be a sponsor of deals and you actually want to run them yourself, being a key principal is something that you may be interested in. If you don't want to do a deal on your own, I don't really see any need to be a key principal. So let me explain a little bit about what that is and what that means. So probably the best kind of financing that you can get on one of these large multifamily properties is agency debt, which means it's either Fannie Mae or Freddie debt. And yes, you know them from single family, but they also back large multifamily loans. And in order to qualify for them, it can be difficult if you don't have experience, if you haven't done one of these before. Even as a limited partner. Which also just brings me back to something I did want to touch on, which is I purposely, you asked if these were all the same sponsor. They purposely were not the same sponsor. And the reason why was because I wanted to learn from different sponsors that I thought were good, that had experience, because I wanted to sponsor deals myself. So I purposely wanted to see different people's ways of working. Sorry, I just thought that was important to point out. So to get one of these Fannie Mae loans or Freddie Mac loans, the best way to get qualified to do one is to have already done one. It's kind of like, you know, a chicken egg thing. Like you can't really get one until you have one. So if you never had one, how do you get one? Well, you could be a key principal on a deal. And what you're doing, so these are non-recourse loans. So that means you may have let's say there's a $10 million loan. So you're buying a property for, you know, above 10 million. You're getting a $10 million loan. If something goes wrong with that property, they cannot go after, and you're the okay, the limited partners, first off, have no obligation whatsoever. They can't be gone after, and they can't be sued for any reason for anything. They're part of the LLC and they have total protection. But as a general partner on the deal, and being the person who signs on the loan, they could go after you on the loan. And so like on a single family, if something happens to your property and it goes belly up, you're on the hook for whatever that purchase price was, right? You know, minus whatever equity you have in the property, obviously, but that equity may have been totally evaporated depending on, you know, what the situation is. On these multifamily, on a non-recourse loan, they cannot go after you personally for that. They can't come after your home or your other assets if this property goes belly up. If it goes belly up because of normal, like a business failure that is like a legitimate business failure. So there are carve-outs in these things that they call bad boy carve-outs, which says, hey, if you have falsified any documents, if you lied on your application, if you've embezzled money, if you've done anything wrong, then this non-recourse loan actually becomes full recourse and we're going to go after you. But if for some reason COVID-19 hits, and by the way, all of my properties I've invested in, everything that I've heard, everybody seems to be fine. They might be feeling a tiny bit of pain, but no one's like about to lose their property. But let's say whatever, COVID-19 hits, and then I don't know, there's a nuclear explosion down the block or something, you know, and the property is totally wiped out. As long as you didn't do anything wrong, you're fine. But if you embezzled money, they're coming after you for the full 10 million. And so because of that, the way that they do these is, okay, so if you want to do this loan, let's say I want to sponsor this deal and it's $10 million. They want me to have a net worth of $10 million in order to qualify for the loan. Plus, they're going to want to see there's liquidity requirements. They want to see that I'm going to have at least 10% of the loan amount liquid. So that would mean what, $1 million liquid after post-closing. I'm going to have sitting in the bank. So the net worth thing can be challenging, but the liquidity is very challenging. I mean, even if I had a $10 million net worth, I don't think I would have $1 million just sitting around in a bank. I'd put that money to work. So what a lot of people will do is they will have 1 or 2 or 3 key principals join them on a deal. So in this deal, there were 4 sponsors, and they had enough net worth, but they didn't have quite the amount of liquidity that they needed. So I went and I signed on this loan. And so by signing on this loan, I'm lending them, you know, my balance sheet and my liquidity, so that they were able to meet those requirements. But I'm also on the hook for the loan. I got to be damn sure that these sponsors aren't going to steal money, and, you know, otherwise it becomes recourse. So I became a key principal on this deal, 168 units in Waco. So kind of, you know, another level up from just a limited. And then I had my first sponsorship. So this is the first deal that I syndicated. And this is the property in Lawrence. It's 132 units. It's actually a portfolio of 2 properties very close to one another. It's been doing very well. Started off a little bit slow because we actually had much better retention than we thought we would. We bumped rents up. So our pro forma, because we looked at the market, was we knew we could get $200 more per unit by spending like $4,000 per unit in updates. So we had a plan that we were going to upgrade a certain amount of units in year one. Well, we came in and we started bumping on renewals, people up $100 a month, which is a very big bump. And people stayed. So we didn't spend any money, which was good, but also our rents weren't quite where we wanted to be from a cash flow level, because we thought we were going to have more cash flow, but we were able to like raise the value incredibly because our NOI went up. And then when we were able to actually spend that money, we've been able to upgrade. We've upgraded at this point a little over 50%. I think we're at 55, 56% of the units have been upgraded. And right now, on paper, we should surpass our projections. We had a 5-year projection of a return to give our investors when all was said and done. And on paper, it looks like we can hit that. And we have a broker who thinks we can hit that. But we have there's a rub in this, which is the financing that we got when we locked in. We got a great rate at the time, but that was a little over 5%. And so, rates now are down in the upper 3s, low 4s. So there's a prepayment penalty that we have if we were to pay the loan off now. So we would have been ready to sell this actually at the 1-year anniversary, but we elected to hold on to it because we felt at the time that we weren't going to be able to get someone to come in. And so our loan is assumable, so someone can assume it. And they can also get supplemental financing on top of it. But the part that they assume has to be assumed at the rate that we have. So it did not make it attractive for someone just from the debt component. At this point, because of the COVID crisis, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are requiring anywhere from 12 to 18 months of escrows. You have to escrow principal payments, interest payments, mortgage payments, insurance payments. And these loans also have a repair reserves that they make you save for that will be used for longer term CapEx, things like roofs and parking lots and things like that on your property. They require you to put that money aside in an escrow account as your money to use on your property. But so they're making you do all of those things, 12 to 18 months worth of that off on the side. So right now, if you're looking to acquire a property, there's a large capital cost right now that's extra. So based on that, if you assume our loan, you don't have to do that. And our property has been performing very well. So the banks will be fine without you putting the 12 to 18 months of escrow, so that you don't need a large amount of capital. So because of that, we feel that it balances the numbers out. It just hit the market, so we'll see how it does. But incidentally, Steve, we had 60 people, 60 groups sign confidentiality agreements last week. So they're downloading all the documents and starting to look through the finances and stuff. So
sounds good.
We'll see. We'll see if anyone likes it. We only need one, so we'll see. But that's what's going on with that. So that was my first deal. And then I have also invested in some other properties. I have a 6-unit that I bought in Kansas City. This was an interesting story. Like, why am I going now from 132 units down to 6? But this was something I didn't syndicate. I actually bought it on my own. I have a property that you saw, which was the duplex in Brooklyn, New York. So the lot next to us, we were hoping would get developed, and it is being developed. And we were able to sell some development rights to them. There's the slang term for them is air rights. I don't really love that term because people think you're giving them the air above, and you're really not. But we just can't build higher on our property. The rights that we have on that property to build higher have been sold to them, so they can build their property a little bit higher, and we got paid handsomely for that. But rather than pay taxes on those earnings, we took it in 1031 exchanged into this property here. And this is a nice little cash flowing property in a really popular part of Kansas City, directly across the street from the best barbecue restaurant on the planet. It's called Q39. So if you're ever in Kansas City, make sure you eat there because it's amazing. I'm a big fan of barbecue and it is fantastic. I think that's really the reason why I bought the property. I didn't really care about the cash flow. I just had a good reason to go to Q39. So that's that property. And then there's a 116 unit property that we closed on last year, again, towards the end of last year in Kansas City, called Broadway Ridge. And there's two properties, again, really close to one another, like literally 2 minutes in the car, Broadway and Stoneside. So we call it Broadway Stoneside, 116 units, doing really well. You know what I just realized? I'm gonna show you something. Sorry, we just got these, and so I should have put these in the presentation. Let me show you. That was kind of cool. I'm pretty pumped about it. So we just got professional photos on the rehabs. So check out some before and afters real quick. Indulge me, if you will. Now, these befores are actually a different unit that has been made ready. So it actually looks pretty nice because, you know, this is the old paint color, but it's freshly painted and carpeted and stuff like that. They don't look like that when you get in there, but that's what the original units look like. And this is what they look like now. So this is the model unit that we did. So, you know, we put in plank flooring, right? From carpet to plank. We did the two-tone paint with the gray with the white trim. Here's just another view. And then from the another view from the kitchen. So in the kitchen, we redid, you know, the floor and the paint. We resurfaced countertops. We did the cabinet doors. So you look at these like cabinet doors, they've been refaced. And we did stainless steel appliances. Here's another view. This is a good one where you can really kind of see the difference. And then bathrooms, renovated the bathrooms, right? So with all of this, we're getting $75 rent bumps. And I think we can actually we have some vacancy that we're trying to fill up right now. But once that's done, I think we can even push it. I think we might be able to push them up to $900, which would be $100 a month rent bump, which would be nice. So
how much were you spending then per unit for the rehabs on average?
On those, so the jury's still out because we're still working through it and trying to find some efficiencies and things. We just started doing them. The initial pro forma was around $3,000 to $4,000 to go to what we're now calling a standard upgrade. But for the model unit, which we just saw, we actually spent closer to $6,000, but we did. It now includes the floor, the plank flooring, and those cabinets facing. And so we did that to experiment and have 3 tiers. So $800 for just a regular make ready. $840 would get you the stainless steel appliances and the paint, the switch in the paint color. And then I was like, oh, let's make a really nice model unit and let's just make 2 of them and see, you know, what we get. Let's see if anyone's interested. And within a week of the model being open, those 2 premium units that we had made were rented. So now we've got Thanks. Now we have demand for them, and we don't have them. So,
and then who would oversee the contractors and who oversees these renovations?
Yeah, so the property management company is doing that.
They're good.
So we have local property management, and that stuff. You know, I worked with a designer. It's actually a guy who does. It's kind of weird, but funny. I wanted to find a designer or something, or I would kind of do it. I'm decent with that stuff. But we rented at one of the 6-unit properties. We rented out to. If you go to my website, you can see pictures of that because it's cute what they did to this guy, and they do short-term rentals. So this guy's paying me, instead of $695 a month for rent, which is the market rent, he's paying me $910 a month. But he's doing short-term rentals, and it's completely legal, approved by the city and everything. But so I get way above market rent. He's making money on the variance between that, even in the midst of COVID. He's doing very well, and he furnished the entire unit. So I saw the design. He did a really good job, and I've seen some of his other things. So then I hired him to come in and do the design on that. So actually, the unit, the make ready, was done by we have on-site staff. You know, we have 2 maintenance people full time, and so one of them primarily works on trouble tickets, and the other one works primarily on making units ready. So he did the basic renovations, but then actual furniture assembly and all the decor was done by this other company. And then, so we have a property management company. And for those of you who aren't familiar with exactly how this works, usually, you know, people are buying, you know, it's one of the reasons why you're not really seeing a lot of deals that are being syndicated that are like a 30 unit or a 40 unit or a 50 unit. There's sort of 2 reasons. Number one, there's just costs in doing a syndication that then might not make it, you know, make sense. But the other thing is, you really are going to want to have professional property management. That's my point of view, and especially if you're I mean, I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I live in Boston. This is in Kansas City, right? So at 100 units, that's where you're really going to have enough scale and enough income to really be able to hire a full-time property manager. So what we have at this property, we have 1 full-time property manager and 2 full-time maintenance people. Now, technically, their employer is a property management company. We pay those people's salary and benefits and everything to that management company. And we also pay that management company a percentage of our monthly income. Generally, you'll see it between 3 to 4%, sometimes as high as 5%. 3% usually is pretty low. I'm usually seeing it around the 4% range. That's how that works. So, you know, we have professional third-party property management, and they manage thousands of units in that market. So they know those markets very well. They have, you know, 24-hour emergency hotline in case like someone pipe bursts in the middle of the night, right? They're there to collect rents, which is more and more that's being done electronically online and not as much of a problem. But, you know, they can knock on someone's door. They can, you know, do all those things. They walk the property, make sure there's not trash everywhere, and, you know, those kinds of things. And showing units, a big part of their job is being there to lease the units. So, okay. And so, you know, at this point, I'm a principal in 424 units. I'm including the 2 units in Brooklyn. You know, that property I showed you, the first syndication that I got involved in, that was 77 units. That costs less than the 2 unit in Brooklyn. So I feel like I can count that in my unit count. And so my portfolio has been growing, you know, in the past year or, you know, couple of years. I've added an additional 1,246 units. These are all deals that I'm invested in. And all of these are also passive investments, right? Added to that earlier group of over 1,200 that you saw. But we've sold some of those too. So that puts my whole portfolio a little over 2,000 units. And I haven't bought anything yet this year, although we've got something in the pipeline. But so the last thing that I closed on, we did technically, so we closed on this in early January. So, but the last thing that I closed on is this in Winter Park, Florida. It was called Amber Lakes, and we just rebranded it to Live at Winter Park. I just saw it last time I was down there. It looks great. It's doing really well. But I wanted to kind of bring it back to that first slide that I showed you, which was me in 1975 at Oakwood Village Apartments in Winter Park, Florida. And this is me at that same property. That's me in front of the door that I lived in as a little kid. This is the property that we bought, Live at Winter Park. So this is me 45 years later. Now I own, I'm a limited partner. I don't own the whole thing, but now I own part of that complex that I lived in when I was just a little kid.
That's pretty cool.
So, yeah, I thought it was awesome. So that kind of brings it around full circle, and that's kind of where I am today. That's my story, guys. That's how I started and how I got involved. And so hopefully you found it slightly entertaining and maybe a little bit educational. And I'd love to, if you guys have questions about anything, I'd love to chat and answer questions.
Thanks, Matt. I have one question. So if you're still investing passively, you said, as a limited partner, but you're also obviously doing the general partner and you're a sponsor yourself. So how do you do due diligence on the passive deals? Do you underwrite them the same as if you were doing it on your own?
I do. And so that's I had mentioned I'm writing a book. The purpose of my book is to help people who want to invest passively be able to look at deals. And so I'm trying to help people kind of look at, I've done this before for my meetup group in Boston, like tips and tricks like that sponsors might use to make their deal look good and like, what to look out for. And I've also had just like tons of people asking me to kind of take a look at a deal, especially if it's like one of their first deals that they're investing in passively, like, what do I think about it? And it's happened so much that I'm like, well, gee, maybe I should just read a book and then just give people a book. It'll save me some time, actually. So, yeah, I do. I look at it from that lens, and I don't invest in these things lightly. I mean, I turn down a lot. I get a lot of, at this point, I get a lot of deal flow in my inbox, and most of it I don't invest in. And most of it I don't, I'll look at it and then analyze it to go after it, that it's coming in from a broker as a investment, as something that I want to sponsor. And quite honestly, there's not enough good deals. There's so many people chasing deals that the prices are just getting run up through the roof. And I don't have to do a deal. I've got enough investments at this point, and things are okay with my family. Not, I'm not like driving around a Maserati or anything, but like, if I don't do a deal this year, it's okay. Like, I'll be fine. So I don't, some people that they need to do a deal to put food on the table, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm not willing to take on that kind of risk. So I'm only investing in deals I feel like super really confident about, because I honestly don't need the headaches, and I don't need to disappoint a whole bunch of investors with taking a deal that's too risky.
Right.
Yeah.
And Matt, what do you think is most important, the sponsor or the actual deal?
So I think all three are equally important. There's three parts, right? There's the sponsor, there's the market, and then there's the property itself. I think they're all important. I think that a good an amazing sponsor can take a mediocre deal and do great with it. I also think a bad sponsor can tank and a super easy, like, amazing deal. So sponsors, very important. That's the person who's running the deal. But then again, even the most experienced sponsor, if I don't feel comfortable with that market for some reason, or that particular deal, the way they've underwritten it, there's a guy, one of those deals that you saw tonight, was somebody deal that is performing well, and I really like the person. I think it's a good person, and they had a new deal coming out last year, and I was looking to deploy some capital, so I was like excited because I like the guy and his other deal's doing great, so I invested in the new deal, and the deal came out, and I didn't feel comfortable with the deal. He had underwritten it with a refinance in year 3, and if you took the refinance out, it didn't do well. And I'm always leery about people who say that they can refinance it early on and they incorporate that in the underwriting on the deal. If that's like gravy, that's an added bonus on the deal, that's awesome, but it needs to have substantial cash flow on its own. If I remember correctly, like without the refinance, the cash flow was like 4% cash on cash or something, like very anemic. And I really liked the sponsor, but I didn't like the deal.
What are some of the markets that you're really focused on right now?
So I really like Kansas City. I've been spending some time, the properties in Lawrence. So Lawrence is not Kansas City, but you fly into Kansas City. Lawrence is its own MSA. It's about 45 minutes west. But in, part of the strategy, I was looking in Kansas City and this deal popped up in Lawrence, but part of the strategy of buying that was also to just start to get my name known and get to know the area, which I have. And now I've got, 3 different properties in Kansas City. And it's a market that I know well. So I'm looking at deals there, and I've gotten close on a couple of other times for some other deals that just went for a little too rich for my blood, but I think something will pop up again soon. I have something else I'm supposed to be coming in this week. And then some other markets I've been looking at. I mean, I've been looking in Florida. I mean, I lived in Miami for a part of this time, and I grew up in Orlando. Everything there has just been inflated now with this COVID really hitting tourism. We'll see what happens. Maybe the Orlando markets will soften up a little bit, and I'll get lucky. I don't know. I'm starting to look in St. Louis just because of its proximity to Kansas City. And a lot of the management companies and brokers and stuff kind of also are in St. Louis or have affiliates in St. Louis. So I'm starting to look at some deals there. I've seen some interesting things there, gotten kind of close on a few things. I love Columbus, Ohio. We were in best and final a year ago on a property there that we ended up not getting. So I'd love to find something in Columbus. So if anybody on this call wants to be boots on the ground and can help me find, something, we can partner up, talk about something like that. I like Columbus a lot. And Atlanta's good too, looking in Atlanta. It's just everywhere right now. The market's just really hot. So it's difficult to find good deals.
Any other questions for Matt?
I have a question, Jim.
Good. Yeah.
Matt, first of all, thank you for your time. I have a question on all of the syndications that you showed. Could you give us an idea, if you don't mind sharing, your minimum investment for, like, is there a range? Is it 50,000 to 100,000? Were they all kind of comparable, or are they all over the board in your initial investments there? If you could share, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair question. And I don't mind sharing that. The first investment I did was $50,000, but then I was able to start doing 25,000. And what I found was that I was developing relationships with these people, and I wasn't just like another investor that they had met. I had talked with these people and gotten to know them, was learning from them, and really networking. And then I would ask them, can I go in at 25? If you get to the end, and you've already raised everything that you have, like you just need like, you only need 25 more, like, could I be that 25? And I found that a majority of them were receptive to that idea. So I was able to get in while the minimums, I think there was only 2 deals that I invested in where the minimum was 25. One was 25K and one was 35K. And the rest of the minimum was always 50, but I got into a lot of them at 50 at the beginning. And then I've had ones now, a few that I've gone in at 100. But I don't do anything under 50 at this point because my CPA charges per K1. So I'm like, well, and now I'm in a bunch of them, and, I've got income coming in from them where I'm able to do that. But when I first started off, I was doing, like 25K. I don't know that anyone's going to let anybody in a sizable syndication for less than 25. I mean, my minimum on all my deals is 50 because, and I explain it to people like this, I'm usually raising at least $2 million. So if everyone's putting in 50K, that's 40 investors. If I let people come in at 25K, I'm looking at 80 investors, 100 investors, which is just a lot to manage. Now, what inevitably happens with me is I have a few people who will come in at like 250, or 200K. So, my last deal, we filled up pretty quickly with some really sizable things. And then I had like a really good friend of mine, but he was in the middle of like renovating his home. And he was like, look, all I got is 25K, but like, can I get in? And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, we ended up with only 30 investors on that deal because there were some really heavy hitters who came in. So I let a few people come in at a lower number. But honestly, it's people that I know better, that I have some sort of like relationship with. Someone that, I mean, all of my stuff are 506B, so I do have to have like already a substantive relationship with them. But it's generally people that I let in at a smaller amount. I have an even more tighter relationship with that I feel comfortable doing that. I think that a lot of times the people who come in at a lower number can sometimes be more. It takes more time to provide them with investor relations type issues, where my guys who come in at 250, they know me already. They've already invested in deals with me before, but they're just like, they kind of look it over and they're like, yeah, okay, cool. Like they almost usually ask 0 questions or just like 1 or 2 very minor questions where I'll spend 2 hours on a phone with someone going over a deal. And then they're like, can I put 10K in? And I'm like, well, you knew the minimum was 50 the whole time. So there's kind of that balance there too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. Anybody else? I can tell Joe's got a question. He's just not asking it.
Nothing right now. Thanks for calling me out, though.
You were there like this, like I was like, he's thinking.
No, I'm just comfortable. I'm just feeling good.
Cool. All right. Well, if no one has any questions, we have your contact page here, so I'm sure that if someone wants to give you a call or send you an email, you would be receptive to that. I know we've chatted a couple of times, and I've always enjoyed it. And this was great. This group has some people who are doing deals and a bunch of people who are close and just learning and wanting to do some deals. So I'm sure you'll have some book sales out of this group.
Cool.
And we're putting together our own kind of sponsor screening and deal screening spreadsheet that we're going to share within our group just to help, people figure out what the questions are to ask. And so that's part of what this group is for. We have a lot of beginners and a lot of intermediate, so it's nice to have someone like you that can share knowledge. Now we all have someone we can contact with questions too. So we really appreciate you being here virtually. And if we ever get through this COVID thing, we do have a larger group that has about 60 to 70 people come to those meetings. And we'd love to have you at that one as well.
Yeah, I'd love to go, guys and gals. Feel free to reach out with any questions you have. And if you want to shoot me a quick email, so I have your email, I'll let you know when the book comes out, which should be hopefully towards the end of the summer. I'm gonna do some kind of deal, like on the launch day, where like you can buy it for like $1 or something like that. So I don't know exactly how it's gonna work, but something like that. So if you give me your email, I'll put you on my list and you'll find out about it, and hopefully you'll get value out of it.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Matt. For the rest of the group, we're going to close here, and we have our next meeting June 23rd, but there'll be some emails coming out. So thank you all, and very much thank you, Matt. This was fantastic. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, guys.